Well, as you can see, we're here in a Midwestern factory where a lot of people are hard at work, earning a living. Seems like in our Western culture, a whole lot of people kind of have an aversion to work. I hear all the time statements like, well, why did the weekend go so quickly? Or Wednesday, we call Wednesday hump day. Or TGIF, thank God it's Friday. Well, we see in the book of Genesis that God has created us to work. We're co-creators with God. God worked 6 days and rested one. In this session, we're going to deal with money, work, and debt.
All right, who wants to be in my shoes and preach about money, work, and debt? I just could not wait till today. The only good thing about preaching today as opposed to last Sunday is that this week I was able to pay off my credit card debt. So at least I've got a clear conscience in talking about debt. But I can tell you I will go back in when I move, or I'll have 2 kids in college. There'll be times that'll go back and forth. And even though I know it's a waste of interest and all that, but you know what? I'm not going to talk about that. Is David Hall still? Oh, thank goodness you're still here. I thought, oh God, I hope he didn't go home after the first service. David Hall, a founding member of the church, Discovery, who moved chairs in the beginning, which was a big headache. Now he's on the finance team, and he probably would rather go back to moving chairs than be on the finance team, but he knows a lot about this, and he's leading a class on Wednesday night and to get us out of debt, which is one I took, that helped me so much to just open my eyes to the little things I could do over time to get out of the bondage. You know, last week we talked about the idols and those things that really keep us in bondage, and we've talked about the Israelites a good bit, and we're going back to them. So we'd like to look at Deuteronomy 28, verses 12 through 14. If we can go to the scripture slides, if you have your own Bibles with you or the YouVersion app on your phone, you can go there. This is the Message translation, which I like to read. So we'll share that. You'll recognize this, but it's in slightly different words that you may have remembered from NIV or KJV or something else. All right, it talks about how God gives us a freedom from this downward spiral in debt, but we have to take it. All right, here it starts. Now let me give you a warning. If you want to read, as I did, all of chapter 28, you may want to stop where I stop. Stop if you have little headings in your Bible. These are the promises that God gives you. Then if you turn to about the first third of it, it'll say these are the curses. And let me tell you, the curses are really bad if you don't follow God's advice. So especially if you read it in the Message version, which makes it really clear. So that probably piqued your interest, and you'll probably go read it now. But anyway, I'm just telling you, the first third is the blessing part. This is what God will do if we follow God's commandments. God will throw open the doors of his sky vaults, and that's the heavens, it says in other translations, and pour rain on your land. That means just all the blessings that you need on schedule. And it says in other translations, in his time. So on God's schedule, this rain will come down. And it will bless the work you take in hand. And so we're going to be talking today about how work is God's provision for us. So if you take that work in hand, you do the best with the talents and gifts you have, God will provide blessings and provision for you on his schedule. And that's the hard thing about that, because so many times I'm ready for the rain to come. I'm ready for this drought to be over. I'm ready for this problem to be solved. I'm ready to get this debt over with. But it says you have to wait for his schedule. And then it says, and this is the promise about debt, you will lend to many nations, but you yourself won't have to take out a loan. Now, can't you imagine that, not having to take out a loan for anything? not even for the long-term debt of a mortgage or house, or that is a house, isn't it? A car or whatever. God then will make you the head, not the tail, because you owe so much. You'll be the top dog, not the bottom dog. And here's what we've got to do. As you obediently listen to, so we got to hear, and then do something. Diligently keep the commands of God, your God, that I am commanding you today. Is that the end of it? I guess that's the end of it. There it is. Don't swerve an inch to the right or to the left from the words that I command you today. And here it is, remember what we talked about last week, by going off and following and worshiping other gods. Do you know, I told you last week that one of my gods is Pier 1 Imports. Do you know I drove by Pier 1? Do you know there is a summer season over sale right now, 50 to 75%? Now that just was not fair, but I did not go in because I was going to Krispy Kreme and I didn't stop. I kept going. And that was a lot cheaper than whatever I would have bought at Pier 1, so that was a good thing to go there. But let me read you the rest of that passage because it just has some other good things. No, that's it. That's where it stopped. Then it goes into the cursing. I don't want to read you that part. But the bondage of debt. Now let me ask you yesterday. Yesterday was Saturday. For many people, that's your Sabbath. That's your day off. For preachers, it's not really, as I grew up in a family that did all our chores on Saturday, and that's when we cleaned the house, washed the clothes, cut the yard, all that kind of stuff. So I just in the routine of doing that, and that's when I do that. And then I start in the afternoons getting nervous about what's coming up on Sunday. Do I have everything done? And I'm usually up here late because I forgot to do something and working on my sermon and all of that. And of course, there had to be 2 amazing football games on yesterday that did not let me off the hook until the very last minute. So the question I want to ask you today is what is the worst thing that's going on in your life right now? And you may not want to share this, but you may not mind. What's going on right now that feels like heavy on your shoulders? It feels like bondage. If those 2 teams in Alabama had lost yesterday, we might not be so happy today. But that's a middle-sized bondage. Although at the time it didn't feel like it, but it is a middle-sized bondage. What other kinds of bondage do you or your friends have that weighs over you? You're here because you're in good health, pretty much, right? Or you're fighting something and you're strong enough and brave enough to be here because you need this service to lift you up. I know people here who are going through all kinds of things right now, going through chemo treatments and all kinds of things. What other kinds of bondage is there? What is a weight that you feel on your back or others could have? Relationships, exactly, that aren't reconciled necessarily. I've got this book that I hadn't started reading yet, and it's how to work with or how to love the people that make you the most angry or something like that. I don't know. I've read it several times, and it's still by my bed. That tells you I'm not through with it. What else? Kids in college, that's right. You want to expand on that any? Okay. Paying for it and then worrying about what they're doing while they're down there, and are they eating right and that kind of stuff. Yes. Anybody dealing with, like me, until just this week, but it will be soon, I'll be back in that camp, the bondage of debt. The bondage of debt. Doesn't it? I mean, it is just a weight. Every time you get that bill in the mail, you don't even have to open it to know how much is on that bill and how much the minimum payment is, which means you're paying, I think, very little interest or no interest. David can explain all that, but I know you don't ever pay it off if you only pay that minimum all the time. That bondage of debt and weight, which compared to a loved one being in bad health, compared to losing a loved one in a crisis, is nothing. But it is a weight that holds us down, and it holds us down from, remember we talked about last week, what God created us for is to be generous givers, just like God is. So I had a lady a couple of weeks ago, someone referred to me, he was going through a domestic violence incident, and she needed the doors on her house, the locks changed. And luckily, because I'm a pastor and I knew there's a little fund of money here, I could do that. But if I had had to depend on my discretionary funding, and they told me it was going to be $150 to do that, which probably if I got somebody else to do it, wouldn't have been that much. But anyway, I couldn't have helped her. So if I want to help people, if I want to give money to UMCOR, because all the money that goes to UMCOR goes straight into those tents and that money, there's no overhead taken out, I can't do that if I'm paying it all in interest to debt. So it's a bondage that's there. And we know that God provides for us. God's provision for us is work. That's the biblical concept of provision. We were created to work in the first chapter of Genesis, and God worked, we know, expended creative energy for some 6 days, a long period of time, and then on the seventh day, God rested. So for a seventh of that time, God rested. Now here I want to ask you to raise your hands again. This is not about debt, so I think you probably feel okay being honest. Whatever day your Sabbath day is, mine is Monday, usually. It hasn't been Monday since I got in here, but it usually is Monday, and it's going to be Monday someday, back again, because I just, I'm leading worship, and I'm teaching classes on Sunday, and it's not restful. So on Monday, if I'm really practicing the Sabbath, which, as you remember, is one of the 10 commandments, not the 10 suggestions, but the 10 commandments, like don't commit adultery, don't kill anybody. I mean, they don't put you on death row for not keeping the Sabbath, do they? But it is a commandment, just like all the rest. All right, divide your day off, or days off, if you're smart, and divide it into 3 sections, morning, afternoon, and night. All right? So I want you to raise your hand if on your Sabbath day you keep God's commandment because you know it's smart, that God's smarter than us, and you practice a full day of Sabbath rest and renewal. Raise your hands if you do that. Because Americans, hard work, Protestant work ethic, we're not rewarded for that, are we? So we're just all saying right now that we break one of God's commandments. All right, raise your hand now if you do better or about as good as I do, and keep 2 of those sections of your day. If 2 of the sections you keep as a Sabbath, if you rest and have some renewal. And I mean, I'm not talking you have to sit still all day, but if you cut the grass and you like it, like my dad does, or something, but you don't do work that you otherwise would do. Anybody do 2 sections of the day? Ooh, you people are bad. Goodness. Nobody? I feel lazy all of a sudden. All right. 1/3 out of the whole week, do you do 1/3 of a day? Do you watch cartoons in the morning? I mean, we started that when we were little. I mean, do you do something? Oh my gosh, think about that. The only way we're ready to work and to give our best to our work is if we have that time of renewal and refocusing, and we wonder why we run in on the next day we go to work and we start answering emails, and it's almost time to go home and we're still not finished with emails, and we haven't done anything we planned to do that day because we're not focused, we're not ready. I want to ask you this. 2 ends of the spectrum, people of life, people who are paid the least in our country for the valuable work that they do. Who do you think that would be? And I'm not talking about McDonald's, even Krispy Kreme workers. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about people who do really serious work that cares for people in our society. I'm giving out too many hints, but teachers, firefighters, policemen, nurses. You're not guessing what I'm thinking. You're probably right, but that's not what I'm thinking. Wives, I'm getting there. Child care workers are paid the least of anyone, except if you're flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. Have no benefits usually. Now, I'm sure that's not the case here. I don't know what they pay here, but I doubt it's that. All right, so think about the people we value most in life are our children. And we pay the least as a society to them. You know who's on the other end, who's paid the least to care for people on the other end? Who are those? Hospice workers, nursing home workers. If you can't get a job anywhere else and you're an able-bodied person, you probably can get a job in a nursing home if you pass the background check. There's something wrong with that, isn't it? There's something wrong that we pay the least to the people who are taking care of the most vulnerable people in society. There's something wrong with that. Work is God's means of provision for us. Remember the scripture we read, God is going to open up the storehouse, it says in the NIV, a blessing based on your work, sending rain at just the right time when it is in season. So much of the time we don't want to wait for that rainy season to come. I don't want to wait. I want to work at something and I want to see some results, or otherwise I figure, well, I'm on the wrong track, so let's try this way. And then I'll work at this. Sometimes we change jobs. We flip jobs for greener grass and we say, I'm going to try this job. But you know, the same issue I had with that other job, I have the same issue with this job. So I'm going to jump tracks and I'm going to try to find something else. That doesn't happen as much now because there's not as many jobs out there. Or you join a new church, or you're looking for a church and you are looking for a new small group, but after a few weeks we still feel like an outsider, so we look for another place to belong. We just can't wait for the rain to come, but that's when we miss the miracle that God has to bless us with. And that's why last night this really, really spoke to my heart. God will open up that storehouse of blessing based on the fact that you're working at it, you're doing your best, and will pour out that rain or that blessing at the right time. And I said to myself, Cheryl, it's just not the right time yet. When it's in season. So God's means of provision is through our work, but we never lose sight of the true source. Who is it that gave me a call to be in ministry? It certainly wasn't a voice coach or anybody that thought I could speak well, because when I first started preaching, it was painful. Not only was it painful to me, it was painful to everybody listening to me, because I was so scared. My voice was like this, and my knees were shaking, and people were just like, please get her off the stage. She is like raising my blood pressure. I feel so sorry for her. But, and I still get nervous doing all the other parts of the service, but I don't when I talk about Jesus. Finally, I realized, you know, there's no better material than the words of Jesus and the words in the Bible, so as long as you stick on that, you're pretty well covered. So thank goodness that broke through somewhere. But the giver is the one who gives us the skills and gifts that we work with. So we don't primarily work for the income, even though we have to pay our bills. But remember, Jesus said, seek first God's kingdom, God's priorities, God's righteousness, God's right relationships, and then all these other things, your bills, your relationships, your job, your other things will be added as well. But seek first God's kingdom. So we're in this for the outcome, a life of work with integrity, righteous work. That means work where you have right relationships, and that is not always easy, is it? I hate to see people who like their job, but they work with folks who bring them down. And they say, and I pray for them, and I try to be a Christian around them, and it just brings them down all the time. That is a hard place to be. But we're in this for the outcome, a life of work that's righteous. In Proverbs 22, which has a lot to say about people and wealth, a good reputation is better than much wealth. High esteem is better than silver and gold. So in any kind of honest work, we can honor God by building those righteous relationships, by building up people. And David, if you'll come up, I want to tell this last story as you're coming up. It's a story about Nathan. He was here this morning. I told a quick version. You know, I got to get a new one of these. I really do. We need to put that on our wish list. Who's got that wish list? We need to put it on. There's your mic right there. But Nathan, when he was little, my youngest son, had them both in the car in the van in Decatur, and I was driving him to elementary school, and they have these back alleys where the garbage truck goes behind the houses. And so I am known as the late Cheryl Blankenship, not because I've died and risen again, but because I'm late a lot of times. I call it my ministry of hospitality, because if I'm late, then you don't feel bad being late. So that's the way I like to think of it. But anyway, so I'm rushing, trying to get them to school, and Nathan's moaning and groaning because he doesn't want to go to school that day. He's sleepy or whatever. I said, but Nathan, you have to go to school to get a really good job. And I said, Mom wants you to be able to do anything you want to do, but you have to study hard and have good grades. I mean, I started when they were young to get into college and get a scholarship so Mom and Dad don't have to pay for you to go to school. I didn't add that part, but I just said, to do what you want to do, you've got to go to school. And so we're behind this garbage truck, and the guys, it's raining, and they're like swinging off the side of the garbage truck, and it's moving this way, and it's pouring down rain. I said, see those poor men in front of us? Look what they have to do. I said, I don't know if they got to finish school or not, but, look what they have to do. And Nathan took a look around. He said, man, that looks like fun. I want to do that. So it didn't help reinforce my teaching about work and all of that, but what we do and how well we work and how we share that with our families when we get home, of not only it was a terrible day and so did this to me and that to me, to say, somebody was going through a really hard time. Jason Daggett is great at this. He is like a people magnet, isn't he, Sherry? And probably Sherry is too. They do it both. But Jason is like a magnet, and he's such a great magnet. He funnels them to me sometimes, and he says, I was at work, and somebody just seemed down, and so I went to talk to him, and then I found out. And, just recently we've been trying to help this woman in a domestic violence situation, and for our children to hear us come home and talk about work as an opportunity for the outcome and not the income. Okay, I'm not sure how to segue into debt, except that you can't be generous if you got a lot of debt. So would you tell us how to get out of debt, David? Thank you.
Thank you. Real quick, 5 things that causes us to have debt, and 5 problems why we have debt. First, we don't know where our money goes, because we spend it, and at the end of the month we go, where'd it all go? Secondly, we spend too much. Thirdly, you don't know what debt to focus on. Fourthly, you can't stay motivated with your debt. And then fifthly, you don't have enough income. So the next slide, here's 5 things you can do to address those small problems.
But David, tell us what we're supposed to do if we don't have enough income. You said this morning. Oh, I'm so sorry.
See, I'm like you, I changed my sermon.
I'm so sorry. I know, you had to hear it this morning, didn't you? I'm sorry.
Getting out of debt, first, you got to know where your money's going. Today's technology, there's great things you can use on your smartphone. Mint.com comes to mind, Quicken, those type of things that help you track where your money's going. Go to your credit cards, your bank, you can download that, and you can categorize it where your money's going. Secondly, we spend too much. We spend too much on things, as Cheryl mentioned, the other gods. So that's a mindset that you got to get over. Is where is that money going, and do I really need to spend that kind of money? Thirdly, you don't know what debt to focus on. There's 2 rules of thought here. One, you take all your debts, your different credit cards, and you sort them by amount outstanding. You can pay off your smallest debts first that can help you reach your goals of paying off the debt so you can actually see the progress you're making. The other rule of thought is you categorize your debt by the highest interest rates first, and then you pay that one off. So that gives you more money to pay off your other debts because you're reducing your interest rates. You go to the next slide. So set yourself a goal and a deadline. Now, this is like running a marathon or losing weight. You're not going to get it done in a week. Or to train for a marathon, it's going to take some time to do this. You've got to be realistic with your goals and yourself on how you reduce your spending, getting out of debt. Thirdly, spend time with people who share your goals. If you're spending time with people that go to the mall every Saturday and you're with them spending money, that's not probably going to help you get out of debt. So one thing you can do, we're starting a class on freed up financial living. Meets on Wednesday nights out here in the conference room. start at 6:30. There's a book. There's some books out in the welcome gathering space out there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Track your spending. Again, you may be able to use your smartphone or your PC and track where your money's going, so you can track that. And understand interest rates. I mentioned highest interest rates first, pay those off. If you can, get your spending under control. You can get a consolidation loan, because interest rates right now are on a credit card 15, 18, 20% versus either a home equity loan or some type of consolidation loan, probably in the single digits of 5 to 6%. What did you bring up a while ago?
Well, now I forgot. Huh? Not enough income, what to do?
All right.
Yeah. I noticed you skipped over it, but I didn't say anything again this time.
Either you can try to get a better job, get more money from your job, take a second job, those type of things. So those things to consider for getting out of debt. And the paying for the seats this morning, excuse me. There's information about the class. It says here the book is $20, but if you act before midnight Tuesday, $15.
$14.99.
That's right. So Wednesday night, 6:30 back here in the conference room.
Thank you. David, as I said, is on the finance team and the stewardship team, and we've really been challenging. Those folks have been challenging us, and I challenged them. I said, what can y'all do, hands-on, to help us get in a better situation? I said, so many young people and young families are in debt, and we can't be generous, and we're not going to be able to, pay for all the bills around here if we can't be generous. So David stepped up. I kind of kept him in the room until I said, somebody's got to volunteer for this. But if you cannot come on that Wednesday night at 6:30, this is so good. You write down on something, give it to me, put it on the desk in the office. Tell me when you can take one. I did the Dave Ramsey course, and that's like boot camp for that. That was way too hard for me at first, because he tells you to cut up your credit cards and just have money in a envelope and spend it. And I was like, good Lord, I don't think I can do all that. But I learned so much about it that it really, really helped me to go forward. So if we are to be what God created us to be, and that's what this whole series about shiny gods is, don't let those shiny gods distract us from being what God wants us to be, a generous person, a person for whom God's blessings rains out upon us in the season that we need it. So that when God calls us to be that person who can help, either with our time, our talents, our money, or our service, our prayers, then we can do that. And imagine how good that will feel. I want to end with this video. It's a great 2-minute short video. It's a happy video about debt, and you can't find too many of those, so y'all enjoy this. The musicians want to come on up.
My name is Sarah Ward, and my husband is Justin, and we have a beautiful daughter, Josie. Our stewardship story started when we took our first Crown Financial class back in 2007. We walked into Crown Financial with $21,000 in credit card debt. We weren't making enough money to be paying that off.
We weren't tithing, but maybe 2 or 3%, and that was a lot for us. And through the Crown Financial, we just felt God leading us to, really put everything in His hands and trust that it was God's money in the first place.
Walking out of Crown Financial, we had a 5-year debt plan, and in 2 years, we were completely debt-free. And through prayerful spending and a close-knit Bible study group, we had increased our tithing to 10%. God has really, really honored that. We got pregnant in the beginning of 2009, and we had Josie in September of 2009. And before we left the hospital, they did a newborn infant hearing screening. They passed a law in 2004. They do that now. And she failed it. So now she has to wear hearing aids, and it's a permanent loss. It will never get better. Insurance covers nothing of the hearing aids. I mean, nothing. We're talking thousands of dollars. And we had just gotten out of debt. We had just bought a house. It's so easy to think, well, we could just take that tithe check and pay it with that. I just said, you know what, God, you brought her into this world. She is a beautiful, beautiful child, and you have a wonderful plan for her. The more that we invest in his kingdom through service, through time, through our tithing and our giving, just the more he invests in us. You know, there's no reason not to give.